Chris Avellone is a writer. I'm not looking at you. Chris Avellone is a writer and narrative designer who just screwed up this intro before we started recording. He is the former, or I guess technically current co-founder, but no longer at Obsidian, and he has been the writer on some recent games, including Divinity Original Sin 2, Torment, Tides of Numenera, and Prey. Hello, Chris. Thank you for being here.
Well, Jason, thank you for inviting me.
Anytime. So we are going to talk about lots of stuff, including your illustrious career.
You are too kind already. Listen to your adjectives. They are insane.
The well-known, infamous, well-respected
Infamous.
Chris
That is
Avellone.
correct.
I think you are the only person who the RPG Codex forums actually like.
Oh, that is so untrue, Jason. Oh my God, it is so not true.
No, is it? Do they not actually like?
No one gets liked for long at the RPG
That's
Codex.
fair.
Actually, you know what? Someone said that if you are well liked on the Codex, it actually means the death of your game.
Oh no, it's like an omen. It's just like a foreshadowing for the future. So Chris, let's start by talking a little bit about Obsidian, because you recently left the folks at Obsidian, and you spent a great deal of your career there.
Yes, actually I spent 10 years working with some of the guys at Black Isle, and then 10 more years at Obsidian, and now I forgot when I left. May last year or 2 years ago? Oh my God.
Wow.
Time flies like really fast.
What, for a little background for listeners, what were some of the games that you shipped at Obsidian? Because we talked about some of the more recent games. But,
let's see. So Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, the longest title in all of existence.
It is long.
Alpha Protocol and Neverwinter Nights 2.
Is that why it wasn't finished? Because you put all the resources into the title?
Lords almost didn't make it into the title because we didn't have enough time. But yeah, no, actually a lot of that was just, and I've said this before, a lot of it was just design overscoping.
Right,
and then
of course.
It was a bit too ambitious for the time frame, and we knew that.
And LucasArts moving up the deadline.
So, Jason, I'm going to say I feel like that's the easy excuse.
Okay, fair enough.
But ultimately, internally in the studio, we were responsible for delivering with a certain time frame.
This guy very consummate professional. I'm impressed.
Well, no, it's just that. So sometimes I feel like publishers often get a bad rap for doing things that they actually are supposed to be responsible for. Mm-hmm. They do it, and then the developers sometimes they're like, "Well, we're just the poor underdogs." But no, they need to take responsibility too.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's an interesting point, and it's something that not a lot of people talk about. Is like the publisher's perspective of things, because usually that's the narrative, right? Is that the developers get just all the credit and the publishers get all the blame, right? So
yeah, I mean the general way it works is because the publishers often aren't allowed to talk about the exact circumstances of what happened. Mm-hmm. Often the developer comes across as the wounded or wronged party, or even the underdog in any situation, when in fact there's probably some very pragmatic things they could have done to ship the title on time.
It's the thing where like also the person who created the characters that you love in the game that you love is the person that you relate to and that you're going to kind of want to side with, where the person who funded it is, they're just some suit, where really like they did fund it, they did make it possible for those things to exist.
Gamers automatically identify, I think, with developers just a lot more. It's just with publishers, you don't always understand the management aspects or the biz dev reasons for why certain things happen.
But you also hear a lot of stories about publishers being like, well, this milestone is slightly off to the left, so we're not going to pay you this month or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah, that does happen. I think sometimes it also results from a lack of communication. I think sometimes milestones can be delivered even 2 weeks in advance in terms of here's exactly what we're going to deliver. Do you see anything wrong with this that might derail things?
Right,
but I mean, I guess there's stories on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, sure. Everybody does some shitty things.
Jason, have you been hurt by publishers before?
I have. Well, a couple of them.
Oh, really?
No. Well, they blacklist us. Does that count?
Actually, that absolutely counts. That seems incredibly unprofessional.
But so we've talked about this before on the show. Bethesda has blacklisted us since 2013, and we've told the story a few times. So I'll tell you after we record the full story, because everyone who reads Kotaku already knows.
Yeah, there was a whole Kotaku post about it, so you know.
There was. But we'll get into that later.
Was it about Pete Hines' murder dungeon?
It was about his. Well, I wrote about his murder dungeon.
It's actually a very festive place. It's actually kind of sweet. And they're all willing victims. I mean, which kind of reduces the edge a little bit, but it's okay.
I sensationalized the murder dungeon, and when he prefers to call it a murder basement, and I called it a murder dungeon. So
I think that the first mistake was the use of dungeon. I think dungeon is kind of a pejorative when you're talking about these kinds of
dungeon
rooms.
Is a pretty loaded term. I'm not going to lie.
It is. Could have chosen a better word there, I think.
That's true. So, Chris, if we went through every single game you wrote, we could be here for 4 hours. Maybe one day we'll do that. But since this is an abridged podcast, why don't we cut to current stuff? I know. Well, so Kirk wanted to talk to you a little bit about Alpha Protocol, which is a game that we both like a lot.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I love Alpha Protocol. I think there's like been I'm kind of curious what your take is in general on like how like the reception of that game. It seems like it got a kind of pretty mixed, middling reception when it came out, and now
Kirk, that's a very polite way to put it. Actually, the reviews I didn't think were all that great, if I recall correctly. I think there were some things that people liked that we did about the game, but overall, I think when it came to like game mechanics and the layout and pacing of the game, it didn't quite succeed, and we know that. Like it was an RPG genre that we didn't have a lot of experience in, and there were also a lot of RPGs and even stealth games like Splinter Cell that did those mechanics so much better than us, and like we absolutely understand that. Like we were sort of struggling with that. Hey, this is our first type of title doing this.
So I do get the feeling, or at least I got the feeling, and I remember I think it was because that was 2010 that game came out, and I remember that was kind of right when I was getting into writing about games and writing criticism and started reading about it, but I didn't really play it at the time.
Did Alpha Protocol inspire you to write criticism?
No, it didn't, unfortunately. I could make up some story about how that game changed my life, but it did not. I actually didn't play it until way later. But then I remember a few years ago seeing people starting to say, hey, actually this game did some really interesting stuff. And talking about some of the narrative things you guys were doing and thinking like, oh, this game sounds really interesting, and playing it and really liking it. I think because I was farther away and I wasn't expecting Splinter Cell level stealth or mechanics that were just going to work that well, I think I put it on easy, and I was focused mainly on what you did with the writing and with the story, which I actually thought was really, really cool. I don't know if have you noticed that at all? Like, do you hear from people?
Yeah, occasionally
like the game,
and maybe this is a way to address it to a larger audience. So a lot of the narrative foundation, including that dialogue time mechanic, a lot of that was done through Brian Mitsoda's dialogue design, and he was the guy who worked on Vampire Bloodlines back at Troika.
Oh, nice.
And,
that's a great game.
Also in tandem, I think, with our lead programmer, Dan Spitzley. And that was a kind of interesting choice, which actually I was really worried about, because I'm like, well, RPG players aren't really used to having like adrenaline time dialogues. Like that creates a little bit too much urgency for most RPG players I know. But then after watching like a crap load of 24, I'm like, well, actually that Brian's right. Like that kind of fits. So having that sort of urgency and dialogue, we're like, well, you know what? Let's just try it. And the weird thing was with the focus groups, they're like, we're getting the same thrill out of dialogues that we do in a loaded gunfight. And I'm like, wow, that's an interesting mechanic. So it seemed like that worked pretty well.
Jason, have you played Alpha Protocol?
Yeah, I remember the original marketing being like, you can be Jason Bourne or Jack Bauer or blah, blah, blah.
You're like sold.
Yeah.
The three J's.
It's funny
and Jason.
Yeah, I'm such a huge 24 fan, and I loved Alpha Protocol because of that. Although, well, no, I didn't love it because the mechanics felt sorry. I see the look on your face.
It's not a sorry. I totally understand.
It felt like it was trying to be an RPG and trying to be a shooter, but not really succeeding at both, and
totally
kind of
agree.
Split the difference. But the dialogue was really cool, and this whole system. I'm actually surprised that no other game has tried to do like a weird timed, interesting system like that, where it's like you have to pick.
Well,
there have been some,
Telltale does it without the sort of the
Witcher does it a couple times at like timed intervals, I think.
What I mean is that nobody has done it as well and with the same quality bar that Alpha Protocol has.
Jason,
done.
that's very kind. Also, to give credit where credit is due, Brian Mitsoda and Annie Mitsoda now, they're also responsible for a lot of the foundation characters and the initial voice actor choices. So a lot of the direction and push also came from those two. So I want to make sure that was also clear.
And also, nobody has tried that genre, the spy genre.
Yeah, I was going to say that is that also like we were making a joke. I think yesterday we were talking to Nathan about one of our writers, Nathan Grayson, about the new Torment game.
Nathan Grayson is awfully hairy now. I'm
that
is a lot of hair on top of his head.
He's a hirsute gentleman. He carries around a lot of hair. He must have a very strong neck. We were talking about that, and he was saying, "Oh, it's really cool because it merges fantasy and sci-fi." And I was like, "Yeah, the two genres that exist." And the thing about one nice thing about Alpha Protocol is it's like, oh yeah, right. There's also espionage, the third genre that could fit in here.
Why do you think there aren't any more espionage games? Like, when was the last time we saw a really good spy game?
I think it's because Sega left the door open for what they actually did not care what type of RPG it was. They just didn't have an RPG in their portfolio. So Obsidian, if you guys want to make an RPG, and then they're like, I think it was Fergus and our chief of technology, Chris Jones, who were like, "Yeah, let's do an espionage game," and then they kind of vanished like within a year. So we're like, "Okay, I guess we're doing we're doing an espionage game."
It's funny because it's so that sort of like there are good like Invisible Ink was a good espionage game in that was a game about like infiltrating buildings.
And the art style for that game was
so killer.
Awesome.
I actually
love
just
those character
saw
designs.
I saw the animator last night. We like ran into the animator on the street, and I was like, "You're good. You do good work."
Yeah, I love Clay Entertainment. Their CEO is also pretty awesome. He's really chill.
Yeah, he's a good guy. But that's also that's about like infiltrating buildings and stealing shit. It's not an RPG where you're
like
getting to do the James Bond part where you're kind of like
just breaking and entering, really.
Right. It's really just a robbery.
We're all trained in that.
Right. The actual espionage isn't actually because like spy stuff is spy stuff. Like I remember, I'm a huge fan of No One Lives Forever. I don't know if you've played this game, and there's one of the cool things about the game, especially the first game, is there are these parts in that game where you're doing spy shit. And like you're walking through the streets of Berlin, I think, at night, and you're answering phones, and there are code words on the phones, and it's all kind of silly, but it's also cool because you just don't do that very often in games.
Who owns that license? Do you guys?
Oh man,
know?
I did a.
We have to.
You're
find,
talking to the guy.
We have to find.
No man,
that.
I did a huge investigative report on this. I published a big article that was, unfortunately, the result was nobody knows, and it is still unresolved. It's amazing. So the people at Night Dive Studios up in, I think they're in Seattle.
I'm familiar with them. I'm working with them.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, really cool guy. So Stephen Kick from there was trying to...
System Shock is what you're working with them on, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They're doing the System Shock thing. Yeah, they're doing a lot of cool stuff. And so Stephen Kick, I think he had spearheaded with Larry Cooperman, the two guys who kind of do a lot of the stuff we're trying to run down... the rights to that game because they had the code and they were ready to do a GOG-ish ready version, and then it was just a nightmare. And I was on the phone with all these people at Fox and at Activision and at I don't even remember where else. Warner Brothers, and it's between these three companies, and nobody knows. Nobody has an answer.
That's a shame. It's such a great franchise.
I know it really sucks.
So you're working on System Shock and Prey, and like how many games are you working on now? It feels like you're working on everything. Every RPG is just like you just tweet like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on this too."
Actually, I'm working on less RPGs than I used to, and it's actually more different genres. Like I never actually worked on like sort of first person suspense adrenaline title like Prey and System Shock, and it's a lot of titles. I can't actually give you a number, but I make you a promise. Okay. You drop me a line in 2 years, and I'll run through the chronology, and you will not believe what's going.
You did FTL, right? You added writing to FTL.
Actually, I worked on the Advanced Edition. Yeah. The guys. I offered to work for free, and I'm like, if you guys need any writing work for the Advanced Edition,
contribute to this game.
And they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, because when you do RPG writing, like that's a lot of writing,
right? But
then when you do FTL, you can do like 100 encounters in a weekend because you're so used to the RPG writing grind. And I'm like, I would just love to help you guys out. So that was a really fun experience. And then that's
super cool.
And then they're like, hey, well, you know what? We're not really doing FTL for our next game. We're doing sort of like this kaiju monster battle stuff. And I'm like, I am interested. How can I help?
Oh, nice. So you're working on that game as well. What's that game called? I forgot
Into the Breach.
Into the Breach. That's it.
It's
nice.
That trailer looks really cool.
Oh, it's like Murder Chess, Jason.
I'm sure it'll be good. Just because
it's got tons of replayability too.
Oh man, I'm psyched. But yeah, how are you so prolific? Are you just so disciplined that you wake up every morning and just
that would be a kind way to put it. Actually, what I do is I turn off all instant messenger.
Okay.
I silence my phone, and then I go to bed. I wake up, roll out of bed, start writing. I write until I get exhausted. Then I check messages, answer what I need to for any emergencies.
Interesting.
Shut everything else off. Keep writing until I just simply can't write anymore, which is usually about 10 or 11 p.m.
Nice. That's a good process. Is the removing.
It's actually it was one of the things we tried to do within the studio, where we either have quiet time or please just don't always be on Messenger, because sometimes you need 3 or 4 hours to get through a writing task, and if you keep getting interrupted every 15 minutes, you're just not going to get there.
You can't focus. I thought initially that you were going to say, well, basically I take Crystal.
A lot of cocaine.
Is it still on my nose?
Hard drugs, yeah.
It seemed twitchy,
Yeah, so now that you're freelancing, are you just working from home and just writing on all sorts of different things all day? What's your process been like?
Actually, I have a number of different homes. It sort
Okay.
of circulates between LA and San Francisco and Seattle, and then
Okay,
going to see my
cool.
family in Central Virginia, which is
Nice.
always a blast.
Yeah,
And then
man.
sometimes Europe. So having a good laptop, and then that's pretty much it. Like it's work from
Just
home,
working
but home
everywhere.
is kind of a bunch of different places.
Rotating. Well, that's cool. And then you go to a lot of the offices of all these different
Yeah,
places.
I drop by when I need to, which actually isn't too often because usually most of the stuff can be handled via remote or Skype calls if necessary.
So something we were talking about yesterday when we were just talking about the sort of resurgence of the CRPG and the the return of this kind of game. When I was playing Pillars of Eternity, I was very struck by this, by the way that the game just describes things to you without showing them, and how that allows the game to have more emotional nuance with the characters than even the most advanced, like Naughty Dog game or something with like incredible mocap, because you can say, oh, he wistfully looked to the distance and it seemed like something occurred to him and flittered in his eyes, but then it's like stuff that you just can't show yet in technology. And I'm curious about, I mean, you've made games on both sides. How, do you think that plays a role in why these games are coming back and the appeal of that? It seems like it kind of went away for a little while.
I don't think that's the reason they came back or that's the appeal. I think that people actually missed a number of things about the isometric RPG experience. Because like we were doing like Baldur's Gate and like Planescape Torment back in the day, a lot of those decisions were just made pragmatically because we never could animate everything or even like get animated portraits. Like it was just too expensive resource-wise to do all that. So we had to describe everything at a necessity, but then people really liked that. And they're like, okay, well, I'm getting more about this character because I'm getting more of the context for what they're saying. The only challenge, and this is going to sound really specific, but the only challenge is you want to be careful if you ever mix voiceover with a node like that, because if you put prose and then they start talking and then more prose, but the voiceover is just the dialogue, it really throws people off while they're reading it.
Well, so like those games and a lot of the games that you worked on, especially at Obsidian, which is a very writer-focused studio, it feels like writing took a high priority. But now that you're moving to games like that aren't RPGs and that aren't necessarily studios that put a priority on writers, do you feel like, I don't know, do you have to deal with more nonsense, more like game designers making decisions that aren't writer-focused and then expecting you to have to deal with the consequences and that sort of stuff? I don't know. Have you ever played the game The Writer Will Do Something?
Yeah.
The Twine game. So our friend Matthew Burns wrote that or co-wrote it, and he was on the show yesterday, and we were talking to him last night a little bit about that and like how it really captures like the game writing process and how the writer gets blamed for everything and doesn't have enough time, doesn't have enough resources. I'm wondering, now that you've left Obsidian and experienced the like real world of game development, if you have to go through stuff like that.
Actually, no. What ended up happening, and so I will use Prey as an example for this. So actually, the Prey team actually does have a strong writing focus because they're the lead writer, Ricardo Bear. He actually is a novelist, and also he puts a high priority on writing, so he's a champion for it at the studio. And also, I think Raphael also puts a high importance on it too, because they recognize that story is going to be a lot of the reason if a game's well reviewed.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was a lot of the tricks that we use for RPGs in terms of like generating reactivity, we're actually able to bring that to a first person suspense adrenaline experience that those techniques they may not be as familiar with, but with RPGs we're like, oh, we used to do this all the time to generate consequences and like choices feel real, and they're all really simple techniques. So that was actually kind of a cool
like
experience.
what? Like what's an example of a technique?
So first off, there's sometimes some really simple variable tracking for like how you initially approached a character, how you treated them, like did you do their quest out of order? Did you not save this particular person? Which initially seems really complicated, but if you choose your battles throughout the game, you can make those experiences very reactive without using a lot of resources. And I think when people initially hear a system like that, their first reaction is to be scared.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that just seems too complicated. But then when you draw it out on the board and you identify like how simple it really is, then they're like, oh, okay, well, we didn't understand it from like a design variable perspective. That actually seems really easy to script, and then the game is better for it.
Interesting. Why is it easy? Is it just because there are only so many contingencies and there are only so many?
Yeah, because usually when people imagine, like, for example, like choice and consequences, like, which is like the catchword, but they don't always realize that some of the simple techniques are, for example, number one is usually every game has some choke point the story goes through. So if you make sure all the results happen at that choke point, you can create a lot of reactivity very efficiently without spreading it across the entire game just pell-mell everywhere.
This is like in The Walking Dead when a guy shows up at the end of the game and then lectures you about every choice that you made, which is, I think, the way that can kind of go wrong. But
okay, well, I would agree. Season Turn 1 actually really bothered me because of that. Because the one core choice that, that
I
motivates
remember
the
that.
antagonist got my hackles up. Because I'm like, I tried to do the right thing and you wouldn't let me.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I was like, grrr.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and Planescape Torment is the game that everybody keeps coming back to. It's like the game that gives you as many like this seemingly infinite number of choices and then pays off at the end as opposed to everything converging.
And Jason, actually, that's another good example of like a simple technique in the sense that a lot of the responses in Planescape actually always went back to the same node, even if there were 4 or 5 responses. But it was how the player said the node, that because the system allowed that to manipulate the alignment, that made every single response important. So that was a way of giving value to responses without necessarily adding more prose to the game.
So when you say the same node, you mean
Oh, I'm sorry.
one
Like the
point
same,
in the
like you could have like, hey, here's a lawful good response, chaotic evil response, but the NPC's response would technically be the same. But because you use a different route to get there, and that modified your alignment, that still made those responses have meaning.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Yeah. So even though it's the same, yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Huh.
When you're working at a lot of different studios or working for different people, do you find that, I'm just sort of curious on a technical level, that the tools that they use are sometimes different? Do you find yourself having to learn new like dialogue implementation tools or whatever you would call it at various studios? Does that take a lot of time?
Sometimes, actually, it's more just the management tools they use to communicate with each other. Like a lot of the studios I work with use Slack just sort of like customarily.
Right.
Other ones, they set up separate Google accounts and they run everything through Google, which actually works out pretty well.
I can see that.
You can track revisions really easily. You can get commenting and feedback really easily, so I like that. And then because of the Gmail lists are so confined to that one project, it makes it really easy to identify what your task list is and get stuff done. So I like it more from a management perspective. From a dialogue tool perspective, a lot of the studios don't actually have proprietary dialogue engines, strangely enough. It's mostly, hey, can you lay this out in Excel? Can we review it in Word and like do all the comments there and then implement it into a much more less visually friendly format.
That's funny. Yeah, I was up at Bioware talking to them about Dragon Age for my book, actually, and so they were telling me about their proprietary dialogue tools and how like every node is attached to blah blah blah. And also Obsidian, they have like, I'm sure they have crazy elaborate tools.
Yeah, I think, and also NXIL made use of those tools for Numenera and Wasteland too. And the way that Obsidian set up those tool sets, they are very like voice actor friendly. They're very scripting friendly because they know exactly what they want out of the system, and it really shines. So
you mentioned to me a while ago when we were talking that you wanted to branch out of writing and like do some design work as well. Have you been able to do that?
Actually, interface design I've been able to jump into. Level design I've been able to jump into.
I love user interfaces, so that's very
actually
cool.
I think it's one of the primary ways that you communicate with the player
and
vice versa.
And
if you leave it too long, like you're gonna cause a huge disconnect between the player and the game.
I totally agree. That's really cool.
So we're working with a lot of the dialogue, not the dialogue, but like the prose interface for System Shock, for example. But there's a lot of really specific stuff that you want to carry over from the original game that worked really well, and then some additional elements that you want to add to it to sort of drive home you're this poor terrified hacker running through this huge space station that's out to kill you experience.
Is it weird working on Prey and System Shock at the same time?
No, actually, by the end they had some commonalities, but it felt enough of a difference because I'm going to be honest, the antagonists feel very different in kind of a cool way. So I think if you played both of them, you would get an absolutely different experience. But you would be able to point to similarities between the two. And I think that but it was a lot of fun to work on both.
Yeah. So you're working on, when we say System Shock, are you talking about System Shock 3 or the remake of the first one?
No, they're doing a reboot of System Shock 1.
Right. But aren't they also doing System Shock 3, or they want to?
I think System Shock 3 is being done by Warren. Is it Other Side in Austin?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, right. Okay.
I do need to do a fact check on that.
Yes, no, you're right. You're totally right. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool though. That's really so many System Shock style games just popping up everywhere.
They should do a System Shock 4 where actually Warren Spector is in charge of the station and he's out to kill you. I think that would be awesome.
Floating Warren Spector head, and like you have to kill Mickey Mouse to get there.
I was just gonna say, I think the enemy of System Shock 3 should be Mickey, and it's all a musical. Awesome. Oh man, yeah.
It seems like a good note to wrap things up on. I would say.
So, is there anything that you would like to plug while you're here? People can follow you on Twitter, Chris Avellone, right? That's your Twitter handle.
Yeah,
just
that's
your
my
name.
that's my imaginative name. Yeah.
And what else? Prey is coming out soon.
Yeah,
That's
it's
really cool.
it's
We're all
I think it's like
excited for that.
May 5/5, May 5th.
It's
but
ridiculous. This year is ridiculous for video games.
It's gonna be even more ridiculous. I think it's gonna
Oh my
gonna be
God.
pretty crazy.
And Torment Tides of Numenera you worked
Yeah.
on, even though people should not buy it on PS4 because the PS4 port is kind of busted.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah,
But PC is the way to go.
Yeah, it sounds like the so far the reception's been pretty
Yeah,
positive. for
Nathan
that.
was here yesterday just raving about it to us.
Actually,
So, yeah, it seems
he
like
had
it's
some
good.
really good design feedback too. That actually I think I'm going to incorporate in future.
his review?
Actually, both that and then last night after a few beers.
Oh, you guys are chatting? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
he-
cool.
he had some
Very
really
cool.
good feedback, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's
He's like, you should put bigger hair on the character.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy. I have to do a blog post about it. Actually, it was very clever, and actually, a lot of narrative designers should follow that advice. I think when they go to it, I was
to
I
put
was
bigger
like,
hair.
yeah, as
No,
big as-
what specific advice?
Okay, well, actually, he pointed out so there's a sequence in Numenera where, like, even though you might be attached to certain companions and you want to bring them in your party,
Yeah.
because a certain area is broadcasting a certain theme, like, hey, there's a lot of cast-offs in this area, you may decide to grab another companion that you know is cast-off focused, even though you don't necessarily want that companion to come with you,
Gotcha.
versus someone you want to join. And I think that's something that designers should keep in mind when they're designing areas, because sometimes if they front load the foreshadowing too heavily for an area, even if that other character who isn't a cast-off may have cool things to do there, the player may think they have to choose somebody else. And I thought that was pretty smart.
Yeah. Cool.
That is like the tradition in some of those games too. I remember like in Mass Effect or in other BioWare games, like you have to bring somebody with to the special area so they have the reaction to their old friend. And you can go there without them, but then you always feel like you're sort of missing this extra context of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here, Chris. Much appreciated. We'll have to have you on for a longer episode next time.
Right.
And we can talk about more of your illustrious career.
illustrious. Hey, but thank you guys for inviting me. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Cool.